Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacey and Phil Thompson.
Greetings and salutations to the Church Solutions Podcast. I don't know what I just said there.
Greetings and salutations.
Yeah, is that what I said?
That's
What does that mean?
So, my name is Steve Lacey. Greetings and salutations mean greetings and salutations.
All right, so
Hello
I'm
and
Phil
howdy.
Thompson. What?
Hello and howdy.
All right, I'm Phil Thompson. He's Steve Lacey, as he just said, and this is the Church Solutions Podcast, and we come to you every week via iTunes, via newmediaministries.tv,
YouTube.
You can find different links on our website, like under resources, I think, for StreamingChurch.tv, because we do streaming video.
Uh-huh.
We also do, what else do we do?
We do
Wake
Church
up.
App Live and myflock.com.
Church App Live and myflock.com. Church App Live is mobile apps, myflock.com, church management systems and websites. And I already mentioned streaming video. So We're off to a good start.
All right.
So today we're going to talk about how to make the right hire for your church staff. So as you know, we do tech-related things, and we talk a lot about tech-related things, but we also talk about church stuff, like leadership stuff, like practical things that enable you and hopefully help you pastor your church, lead your church, those kind of things. And we do that because we've been doing this since Eisenhower was president.
Yes.
It seems that way, but we've been doing it for a long time. So that's what we're up to today. So we're going to talk about some steps that you can take to hire, somebody capable. Maybe your church is growing. Maybe you need to replace somebody. Maybe you just need to add staff, which is a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? How do you find somebody that's going to fit in with your church?
Right. So, general rule of thumb is to hire slow and fire quickly.
Hire slow, fire quickly.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit.
So you want to take your time making sure you're bringing on the right people. And if you found you've made a mistake or things aren't working out, it's best to kind of bite the bullet and cut the cord and release the person onto bigger and better things as quick as possible, rather than let things drag on and see if they get better or whatever.
I used to work with the general manager in broadcasting when I was in radio. I'm still good friends with him today. And he used to say, whenever he was going to let go of somebody, he used to call him in his office and say, "Well, feel like the Lord's moving you on." One of my disc jockeys, who I think we fired and hired him a couple times, said, "Yeah, Doug's the only one that you can walk in his office and feel really good about being fired." But
well, that's good. That's a good trait.
It is good. Yeah, he was always good at doing that.
Yeah, so you want to definitely take your time, and that's kind of getting into what we're going to be talking about. So, in my former corporate days at the large aerospace company, I hired a bunch of people, and what I found worked really well would be to bring in people on a kind of a temporary basis. So I hired a lot of engineering students that were still going to school on a part-time basis.
Right.
And so what that allowed me to do is take a really good long look at people on a kind of a temporary basis. And if they looked like they were a good fit and they were going to work out, then we would offer them a full-time position.
Yeah, so you see their skill set, you see their social abilities.
Right. See how they're going to be. Yeah. Right. And the other thing, and then beyond that, we were hiring developers that did software development work. We'd hire contractors, or we'd hire people as contractors. So we'd hire them as temps and say, "Yep, this is a 6-month position." And if they weren't a good fit, so it allows you 6 months to get to know these people. Right. And so I thought it worked really well for me and the people around me to be able to bring in people on that kind of basis. So, and that's a real slow hire.
Yeah, it is slow, but it also gives you a nice little exit ramp, off ramp. If it's not working, you said,
"Hey, this was a 6-month gig. Your 6 months are up. Sorry, but that's what the commitment was.
Right.
And if it works out,
Yeah.
otherwise, then, and so we would get, I hired just a ton of different people, and a lot of them would say, "Oh, this isn't a good fit for me. I'm going to go work for some other company when I graduate or take a contract job." And so they'd kind of move on their own. And those that it was a really good fit, then we'd make long-term hire.
So how do we translate this to the church world?
So, you've put together some notes here.
I did.
And the way I correlate this is we've got volunteers.
Right.
So those volunteers is a good pool of people to evaluate people for a hire. So the part-time or the beginning work would be, let's have you volunteer around here for a while, so I can get to know you.
I like this model. I mean, it's and that's obviously what we're going to talk about today. Is really the first step I would suggest would be to build a volunteer program at your church if you don't have one. And I know there's people listening to me right now and go, oh, we got to set this up, we got to line this up, we got to make a program. And again, if you want your church to thrive long term, you're going to have to put some work into some of these systems that are kind of under it, so to speak. And so, there are some churches that just their volunteer programs consist of, hey, can we get somebody to do this? How about you? And that's one way to do it. But if you can set things up, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, to have a little bit more of a systematic way of doing it, it will not only help your volunteers, your program accomplish more and take less stress, from you, but also you could hire some people out of this.
Right.
And that's one way to hire somebody.
So one of the constraints of going this route is, well, the person's going to need to be a volunteer, which means they're going to need to be local.
Right.
They're going to need to be. So there are some cons with this.
Are.
I just I read or listen to a lot of books, and I re-listened to just last week The Good to Great book by Jim Collins.
Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah. So one of the key stats, this kind of ties into this, is they talk about where the key executives came from, and the companies that became the great companies. I don't remember the stat, but it was like 85%. The executives came from within the company as opposed to hiring from the outside.
Yeah. So, and the advantage of that for your church is that those people, if they're volunteering, chances are they have a good understanding of the vision, your mission, how things work around the church.
Right.
And if they're still hanging around, if they can tolerate you as a pastor or, executive pastor, whatever you might be listening to this, or maybe somebody on the board of directors, if they can tolerate you as a volunteer, then, there's probably a pretty good chance you might be able to work together, Not always, but it could be. So this is one way. So what we're advocating here in this particular podcast is consider some volunteers and hiring from a volunteer base, which we're going to kind of get into some of these things here in a second. I keep saying that. Of course, the other option is to, go a different route.
Yeah, and put an ad out and interview people.
Right, which could, it could work, here's my key to me, every job I've ever had, and I've had a lot, because I'm getting old now, but it's usually relationships that somehow or another build the bridge, and so almost everywhere I've ever worked, it's because I've had a relationship with somebody that was either the head of the company or, on that. So anyhow, let's just move into this. So first thing I would encourage you to do is build your volunteer program. So maybe you're not looking to hire right now, but if you're pastoring a church, you hopefully want to grow and you want to see things happen. So, as we just said, a lot of the people at staff could come out of this volunteer program and they would have a good understanding. So how do you do that? I would strongly encourage you to make to get volunteers on board and really solicit, if I can use that word, volunteers. And so when you have meetings on Sundays or whatever you have, you should always have something in your program, some information on your table, something maybe on your slides if you're showing video or projecting things on the wall between services or whatever, that really encourage people to get involved as a volunteer. There are people sitting in the pews, if you have a pew, and there are churches listening to us that have pews. There are people sitting in your church right now. Many of them want to get involved. They just don't know where to start. You see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at me like you just swallowed a canary or something. There are people that are looking to get involved. And honestly, that when people get involved in your ministry, that they're going to probably stay and add to what you're doing there. So really, you want to utilize as many outlets as you can. Your newsletter,
so
anything you've got.
Just being aggressive with making it known that you are always actively recruiting or looking for volunteers, right? So
and depending on your different departments in your church, I mean, it could be audio, video, it could be children. I mean, every church I know, unless you're going the wrong direction, needs children, people to help with the children, needs children ministries and stuff. So you can break it down and be specific, not just, hey, we need volunteers, come help us. That's not the creative way to do it.
Right.
And I'm going to get into how you can do that in a second, but you can put in different things that you've got going on, different ministries, and one of those ministries might attract somebody,
right?
Because you have gifts and talents.
Specific and
be specific in what you're looking for. So again, you really need to develop, I think, a culture of volunteerism, if I can use that word, okay, and really make that a part of your church.
Are we going to be walking through each of the points that you've laid out in our notes, or we're going to talk?
Yeah, let's walk through the points.
So we kind of build a volunteer program. We talked about that. Okay. And then advertise for volunteers.
Yeah. And
you kind of talked about that to a certain extent.
Develop a culture of volunteerism is my third point here. So let's get over to volunteer orientation, because to me that's a very important thing. Most churches don't do this. I shouldn't say most. A lot of churches don't do this, but there should be some kind of a setup where you have, I think, this is just me speaking here, I think you should have some kind of classes or whatever you want to call them that help people discover their gifts and talents, and then lead them to the next step, which would be getting involved in ministry. Now, not everybody does that, but it might be good because a lot of people like to learn about themselves.
So, and you're referring to the most popular thing out there is the shape, right?
Well, I don't know if it's the most popular. It's something that I've grown up with.
Yeah, I was the most familiar with. So
the last 20-some years, because we've used it at the churches you and I were at.
Yeah.
And it's a Rick Warren deal. It's shape, spiritual gifts, your heart, which is your passion for things, your experiences. How do you spell heart? Shape, S-H-A, your abilities.
Yes.
So S is spiritual gifts, P is I'm way off track here.
Shape, right?
H is your heart, A is your abilities, P is your personality, and E is your experiences.
Yes.
Are your experiences. So if you can come up, and we talked about this in a podcast earlier, a few months ago, if you can develop something like that, doesn't have to be crystal clear or the same thing, but something like that, it begins to create a culture of volunteerism, and you can actually get people that can learn about themselves.
Plugged in the places that meet their shape.
And everybody likes to kind of discover more things about themselves. Everybody likes, I didn't know I had this gift,
I was an EFTJ.
Yeah, something like that. And so you can attract that, and then you can begin to steer them towards something that they're gifted at, something that they have a talent for, as opposed to trying to put somebody that can't sing, in the band or on the choir. In the choir, you can kind of get away with it sometimes because there's other people out there. But what I'm getting at is putting people in the wrong place can screw things up. And so as we talk about hiring people here, creating a culture of volunteerism will lead to that down the road.
So this fits under the volunteer orientation.
Yeah, I would say that you want to get people involved. The training part, which would be the next point here. I feel like we're all over the map today. But it's probably because I am. Hopefully, people are keeping up with what we're saying here. The other thing with volunteering is, you've got to train these people, and there should be some kind of a system,
a program
that you can have depending on whatever it is. I mean, we got a guy, I do this full time, but then I work on the weekends for a church part-time. And I'm their executive pastor. And I didn't start in that position. I started out as experienced pastor. And if you don't know what that is, listen to one of our past podcasts. But, I've got a bunch of stuff on my plate now, more than I really want. But I've got some great people in certain positions now. Mm-hmm. Like my audio video guy, he actually worked for the same company you did, aerospace industry, whatever that was, NASA or whatever it is you worked. But Steve didn't work for NASA, but it was Raytheon. But anyhow, he's got a nice little system set up where he has people come in and he trains them. It's all systematic, and he does a great job.
I assume he has some apprentices or interns.
He's he's doing audio video, so it's a little more technical. So you have to kind of, but if you can do that for children's ministry, you can do that for music. Get people sit in on practices, not necessarily be on the platform Sunday.
I know my wife has just started a new role at our church, and she was talking about her orientation, which she. They basically walked. She kind of shadowed somebody that was doing what she was going to be doing,
right?
And then basically she shadowed him for a week and said, "Okay, you're on for the next week." And she was a little panicked and I'm not ready. I don't know where I am, but she managed. So, but it was a good way to rather than just throw her into the deep end and say.
But there's somebody with her. What's she doing over there now?
She's they have a clever. There's greeters, meters, eaters, and seaters.
That's funny.
So she is, I think they call it eater. She's the one who prepares all the food and snack stuff and kind of manages the coffee and the snacks.
And they call that an eater? Because I would think an eater would be somebody that would be, that'd be a verb, somebody would be eating.
Yeah, somebody came up with this about.
Because I would be an eater. I'd love to be
the greeters and the seaters and the eaters. And
no, it's a fun little thing. I could see Jeff or somebody.
No, they didn't. I think it was just one of the volunteers came up with it.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Put a little pizzazz into your when people are walking in the door. Sure. So anyhow, you got to have some kind of a systematic for training. And again, remember here, we're talking about how to make the right hire. But, if you want to get somebody that's got some experience, that knows your church, the volunteers would be a good place to start, provided, of course, you have these things in place. So volunteer training is important. And then I would move into the next point, and that is, as you're working with volunteers, create really some kind of benchmarks or standards.
All right. So, the whole idea, this is, excuse me, this is this is your pool of talent that, these are going to be your hires, your potential hires.
Yeah, potentially. Maybe some of them. Not everybody.
Right. So this would be, this fits into the whole hire slow process. So you want to create some standards around what your expectations are, what their expectations are, that sort of thing, right?
I think so. And I think, and again, this is where, I know that there are some people that are overwhelmed that are listening to us right now. If you're a pastor, maybe you're feeling like, one more thing to do. But if you have material, if you have manuals.
Right. Okay. I would assume standards would be show up on time. Yeah. Show up when you say you're going to show up.
That would be good.
Those sort of, I guess those would be minimum standards.
Those are the minimum standards. Come, but come and stay late. But come early and stay late. But what I'm getting at here is there should be a little volunteer description, so to speak, of different areas.
Oh, okay. Kind of a handbook of.
Yeah, I would think
these are the responsibilities and. Yeah, we've definitely done that in the past.
I think it's important,
especially in the recruiting process as well as people are going through their shape, they can say, "Oh, I'm geared towards this. Let's go read the description of activities for each of these different roles."
And you could get a volunteer to actually put that together. It's not a staff person doesn't necessarily have to do every single thing here. You could get a volunteer who's heading up that area or involved in that area. Say, hey, put together a little booklet or a little manual of what makes things work in the children's department or whatever it is, landscaping department of your church or maintenance, those kind of things. Put something together so that way there's a little standard there, a little bit of a idea of what they're getting into and how they would do that. So, yeah. I don't know. It's just, again, these kind of things we're looking at building a groundwork for something that hopefully as your church grows, it's a good foundation
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to volunteers. And then you can hire people from that area there. So that's what we're getting at here.
All right. So we got the last point here you talked about is value the heart.
Value
Leadership.
the heart.
What do you mean by this?
It really comes down to passion and leadership is what it really comes down to. So there's a difference between someone who has, the ability, the capacity to run the equipment per se, and somebody, sorry, the cat just fell down, and somebody who can just do the job. You know what I mean? And you really what you're looking for is leaders, somebody who's able to lead, because there's lots of people out there. And again, as we're talking about volunteers here, when I did broadcasting for years, I had the privilege of helping to start a couple stations, and we basically. It was really tight financially because we're a Christian radio station and we're trying to do all these things. And so we decided to come up with this intern program, and we decided, actually it was my general manager who really pushed it, to let's kind of have all our announcers all be interns with the exception of maybe one or two. So to do that, I had to train these people. So then I thought, well, if I'm going to train these people, I want to make some, a little extra. I'm putting extra time into this thing. I'm spending evenings working with people. I need to be compensated. So I came up with a broadcasting school.
Oh.
And so we actually charge people a very minimal amount to go through our broadcasting school. And I can't remember how long it was, but it was a period of.
So the interns would pay for the.
They paid
for the school.
They paid. And but when we had two stations, and so in return we had them on one station. Where they didn't do a lot of talking, but they pushed a lot of buttons and made sure the programming was going on on the radio station. And those who were really good, we maybe started to use them for commercials and maybe even put them on the air on our FM station. And so we kind of this whole process we found the good people, and I hate to say the word good people because they're all good people, but the ones that were really talented. Yeah. The ones that were really, had kind of the niche for it, we gave them jobs, paid jobs.
And this is a fairly common approach. More you talk about that, I think of a guy that I worked with that owned a graphics company. And he started with youngsters, and I've actually done this with my company here as well, is brings in some young interns and trains them on how to use Photoshop and it's kind of an outreach ministry thing on offering computers and expertise and stuff to train these guys up. Right. And what happened is some of those that were more talented, he'd end up turning around and saying, well, how would you like to come and work for me? Right. So it worked out really well.
Well, in my little broadcasting school, which we ran for just a few years, there are still people in radio today because of my broadcasting school. Wow. And they're over at other stations, and a lot of them over at the other Christian station here in town. A number of them. Where I'm talking more than just one or two. I'm talking, probably at least 10 that I know of. And in fact, I was driving across country one time years ago. I think on my way to Kansas to start that church in Kansas, and I heard one of my announcers on in Albuquerque, of all places. And I actually called him, got him on the air, and talked to him a little bit, and he'd gone through my broadcasting school. Wow. And so, and I say there was other people who helped me do it, but I brought in different people from different stations. So anyhow, what's this have to do with church stuff? Okay,
with hiring.
With hiring people.
This is all. All geared around hire from within, train people up, set some expectations, have a program that is a trial period kind of thing, and so
and again, as we wrap this up, place a higher value on people who have a heart, for your church, probably even above those who have raw talent. So what I'm getting at is that they have a heart, they have a passion, and hopefully have the ability to lead teams. Because if you're going to hire a staff person, eventually they've got to be able to be a leader. Right. It's not going to work if they can't lead. I think I don't know who is John Maxwell says, if you think you're a leader and nobody's following you, you're just going for a walk in the park. And that's really kind of the way it is. And so I always look for that in churches. When I'm working with churches, I always look for, who's doing what, and are there people that he or she has gathered around them, and are they leading those people in a positive way? That to me is a good indication of somebody that's either a future staff person or at least a future leader in the church. So anyhow, that's it in a nutshell. So you agree with us, disagree with us, you have suggestions when it comes to hiring people for your church. And again, we kind of snuck in the volunteer thing under this a little bit because I think volunteerism is very important in your church. We'd love to hear from you. Support at StreamingChurch.tv. Support at StreamingChurch.tv. And we'd love to get your feedback on this stuff or anything else that we've done. And we certainly appreciate you giving us a review on iTunes. Just look for Church Solutions Podcast and give us a review.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah. All right. Or you can catch us somewhere on YouTube under StreamingChurch.tv, the audio, and NewMediaMinistries.tv. And check out our websites while you're at it. StreamingChurch.tv, ChurchAppLive.com, and MyFlock.com. And those are all we got right now. But we're working on something else, too.
That's right.
We'll unveil that sometime down the road a ways. Folks, he's Steve Lacey. I'm Phil Thompson. We hope that you have yourself a great day, a great week, what's left of it. We will catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Take care.